Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Tech Guy off the radio live stream, totally spontaneous, completely unrehearsed podcast live stream. I am your host, Pete the Tech Guy, half fedora, Doctor Who scarf, and all that stuff. Will travel, or as I would put it today, we'll sit right here and talk to you about news of the week, things to discuss, and so forth. And as soon as I'm done, I will also be running off to Happy Jack's and dine outside at a restaurant for the first time since March, and I can't wait. But despite the fact that it opens at 3 o'clock, we're putting that off so that I can talk to you. Thank you for spending some time with us. Just an FYI for those joining us for the first time, that you can find the various links that I will be discussing in chat. I've already put those out into chat. So feel free to grab those and check them out either during the show or after the show. If you can do walk and chew gum at the same time. Either way, be very, very happy. I'm very happy that you're here. And it is time to discuss the latest production of Clueless in Seattle, starring the governor of Washington State and the mayor of Seattle. And I got to say, to begin with, that I've always had a little bit of a prejudice against Seattle, despite the fact that Ichiro played for them. I love Ichiro. Big Ichiro fan. The reason being that on my honeymoon, I honeymooned actually in Portland because our trip to London fell through at the last minute, and my wife's relatives had family in Washington, right at the Washington border. So we honeymooned in the Portland, Vancouver, Washington area. And the only dark part was going to Seattle and getting lost there and so forth. We had lunch there at some Chinese restaurant. It was not a Japanese restaurant. It was not a good time in Seattle. So I've always had a little bit of prejudice against it because of that experience. Although I got to say, I am so pleased that despite the fact that it's beautiful country, and it really is beautiful country out there, the best move I never made was not moving out there, considering how crazy it has gotten. And I want to really talk about this production of Clueless in Seattle. And there's a lot of cluelessness going on. There's cluelessness on the part of the protesters. There's cluelessness on the part of the police. But the cluelessness on the part of the media. But the most clueless people are those who are hitting Trump over it. And I want to talk about that because I saw a piece at from Pundit attacking the president for tweeting us. And I thought, and I'm watching this and I'm saying, don't you get it? You would think that people would get it at this point. But I'm pretty much convinced that most of it is wrestling. Most of it is shtick. I remember the first event I ever went to with people from the media was at the Democrat convention in 2004. National Review, before they went insane, had this luncheon thing in part of Boston. And I remember the turkey tips because they did bad things to my stomach. But Kate O'Byrne was at the table with me. And I asked about something, and Kate O'Byrne basically gave the game away when she said, you got to remember, this is all shtick. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, shtick is basically an act, for a comedy act. This is my shtick. Roger Field's shtick was he gets no respect. People have a shtick. That was their shtick. The confrontation and all this stuff. They're all there to get the eyeballs. And I am convinced that Alapandin's shtick is to be the never Trumper on hot air, to give people who would normally not visit hot air a reason to go there, and people who are there a reason to comment and get angry. I'm convinced that that's his shtick, and that's what it's all about. And I want to read you this piece I wrote on the subject because I think it's very significant. And it's titled, Attention Ala Pundit, Trump is making Inslee and Durkin's production of Clueless in Seattle go national. Now, I'm not going to just read this word for word. I'm going to kind of explain it. Because Ala Pundit was very, very upset at what Trump said. and what Trump did concerning the tweeting. And I want to read you the original post, which I forgot to include in the list of links, but if you click on my link on the subject, it'll have this post linked. And this is what Ala Pundit said. This is from Hot Air yesterday at 11:31. Part of me wants the cops and the National Guard to go in today and stop rounding up hippies. But another part of me wants to sit back and let the narcissist retelling of Animal Farm play out a little longer. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. Didn't take long. After all, they're going to be at the Some Animals Are More Equal Than Others stage by this weekend, with purges to follow thereafter. Actually, is this the right link? Yes, this is the right link. So let's get back to where I was going. I'm doubling down on what I said in yesterday's post. It remains difficult to tell whether the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, which is what they call themselves, is essentially a elaborate drum circle or the beginning of a large-scale hostage situation. It's actually the latter, although there's some elements of the first. It's equally unclear if the city and state think they'll have difficulty cleaning out the area, or if they're just holding off for the time being to avoid the optics of cops advancing on young wokeness because they won't leave when they're asked. And there's an answer to that, too, which is coming up later. There are sinister developments. Last night, John posted this clip of the Chaz, new warlord Ray Simone, enforcing Law and Order. Long-legged Secretary Chaz. The Seattle Autonomous Zone, and this is from the tweet, is developing into warlordism. Rapper Raz Simone, who's become patrolling the barricades with an AK-47 and a handgun, has begun assaulting residents who disobey him. We are the police now, says the crew. We are the leaders, and he has video. Seattle cops admitted at a press conference that they've heard reports of extortion inside the area. I reproduced one such report myself yesterday. Quote, she said police are receiving reports of armed people making the checkpoints, intimidating people trying to enter. Quote, while Washington is an open carry state, there is no legal right for those arms to be used to intimidate community members, Nolte said. Nolte said operating a citizen checkpoint on a public street is illegal. We have heard anecdotally of citizens and businesses being asked to pay a fee to operate within the area. This is the crime of extortion. The city's fire to the scene yesterday in the hopes of closing two large metal gates to the now abandoned police precinct's garage. The occupiers helped them do it. We got a team and we're working through this, and there's some trust built. I don't want to compromise the trust, said the chief, who asked afterwards about the unusual arrangement. The New York Times read on it, while astounding, is correct. Quote, the protest zone has increasingly functioned with the tact blessing of the city. They even got their own street signs for Christ's sake. On the other hand, as Julia Rosa's point says, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone basically turns into a block party in the evening. That's from our town hall cousin, Julia Rojas, who was on the scene. Times also noticed the block party atmosphere, calling Chaz Pot Street Festival, Pot Commune. Hundreds gathered to hear speeches, poetry, music. On Tuesday night, dozens of people sat in the middle of an intersection to watch 13th, the Ava Dunleary film about criminal justice system's impact on African Americans. On Wednesday, children made chalk drawings in the middle of the street. Sounds like the equivalent of campus sit-in, except possibly a little more chill. It can't go on forever. Real life isn't campus except inside the New York Times newsroom, no matter how much the left wishes it was. Christopher Ruffalo of City Journal asked one Seattle cop what the plan is. The answer? No plan right now. According to the Seattle police officer with knowledge of internal deliberations, the leadership is in chaos, and the mayor has made the decision to let a mob of 1,000 people dictate public city safety for a city of 750,000. The officer said the chief best had dispatched high-ranking police officials to the autonomous zone to establish a line of communication, but the officials were immediately sent away by armed parliamentarians at the barricades. The tide of public opinion is on the side of the activists, and they're pushing the envelope as far as they can, said the officer. It's not hyperbolic to say the end game is anarchy. Amazing. Washington Governor Jay Inslee hasn't even heard of the Seattle loss control protesters until yesterday afternoon, 48 hours after the Chaz was born. That's news to me, he said at the conference when asked about it. Now, let me point out, I believe that's a lie. I believe that's a lie, and I will get into why in a little bit. The president, still smarting over his lost opportunity to look tough by deploying troops in American streets, again, this is Ala Pundit talking, sees a new one, quotes, and this is the president's tweet. Radical left Governor Jay Inslee and the mayor of Seattle are being taunted and played at a level that our great country has never seen before. Take back your city now. If you don't do it, I will. This is not a game. These ugly anarchists must be stopped immediately. Move fast. Now, that was from the president, June 11th, 2020. And our pundit did not like this. Our pundit thought it was bad. I thought that the president's tweet served no more purpose than to flex his muscles. That he was basically Jim Gordon asking Bruce Wayne for a missile that came out of his codpiece to launch. This is, for those of you who don't know, that's from the Harley Quinn TV show that DC puts out. Here again is our pundit. It's the Insurrection Act debate all over again. Rather than wait for evidence that the local cops and National Guard can't deal with the problem themselves, he's trying to Bigfoot local officials into inserting the military into the situation. He really wants a presidential show of force against Americans to underlie his law and order message. That's actually not the case, but we're going to get to the why in a few moments. It says a lot about the country in 2020 that both the governor and the mayor thought there'd be more political benefit from goofing on him and his demands rather than siding with him against an armed occupation of city blocks. And here's a tweet from Governor Jay Inslee. A man who is totally incapable of governing should stay out of Washington state business. Stoop treating. Mayor Jenny Durkin, make us all safe. Go back to your bunker. And she tweeted out Black Lives Matter. Click to view Durkin's full tweet, and you'll see that it contains some raised fist emojis at a moment her own city has been declared off limits to police by armed parliamentarians. What? Trump should just skip the duff clatter and instead calmly emphasize that a Democrat-run city can't be trusted to protect its own citizens from woke thugs. Turn up the heat politically on Inslee and Durkin by focusing on the complexity of the takeover minus any threats. Let voters draw his own conclusions about whether to empower Democrats on the national level this fall. Now, that last paragraph actually sounds like it makes a little sense. But the funny thing is, by tweeting, that's exactly what Trump did. And so I interrupted my series on A World Without Police in order to explain to our pundit, whose take on the president and Seattle is clueless on Seattle, and explain what the president's actually doing. Now, what our pundit does not understand, and what all those who are attacking the president for tweeting do not understand, is that the president, by tweeting, the president is actually doing what he suggested, because the president understands DaTechguy's laws of media outrage. DaTechguy's laws of media outrage, for those of you who are new, explain how the media will react at any given time in any given situation. And what applies here is DaTechguy's third law of media outrage, which states the mainstream media's elevation and continued classification of any story as nationally newsworthy rather than of overly local interest is in direct correlation to said story's current ability to affirm any current Democrat liberal media meme talking point, particularly on the subject of race or sexuality. Now, the most noticeable thing about what was going on in Seattle for the last 2 days is that the media wasn't bothering to talk about it. National media didn't want to talk about it. You had a small New York Times piece pretending it was a block party. Nobody wanted in the media wanted to discuss this. Because remember, at a time, and I'm going to tweet something out if you give me one moment. I'm going to put away the microphone. I'll talk a little loud because I want to see if I can draw a few more eyeballs here. Tweeting, talking. Yes. Now on podcast live here. So let me get this out because we want to get a few more people into the conversation and into the chat, because that's why I'm doing this to get more eyeballs, to get more tip jar hits and so forth. Okay. Okay, on that. Sorry about the wait. But again, the whole point of this is to get people Okay. Get that out and see if we get a few more eyeballs. So, as I was saying before I interrupted myself, because of the guy's law of media outrage, the media is completely, or was, I should say, completely ignoring what happened in Seattle. It does not play well for Seattle. Because remember, at a time when the Democrat and media left is desperately trying to spin away the contention that they want to disband or defund police, not to mention whitewashing protests and looting in general, and Antifa in particular, the last thing you need is a black Antifa warlord taking over parts of a democratic city, beating people who disagree with him, extorting cash from merchants, and building a friggin' wall around the place, becoming a national story. So you don't report it. Media bias is big on what it omits. That's why the governor felt safe to say, well, I don't know anything about this. This is news to me, because he took it for granted that the Democrat Antifa left would ignore or downplay the story for him. And as long as they were pretending it wasn't there, he could pretend it wasn't there. Then the president tweeted. Once President Trump tweeted about the situation, what's going on in Seattle becomes a national or international story. Now it forces a response. And now it called for some really stupid ones. And remember, our pundit realized that these were stupid answers, and it was saying, how bad is it that he wasn't criticizing the flippant response, but how bad is it that they thought it was more politically advantaged to give those flippant responses? Well, there's a reason why those flippant responses were important to them, because to actually address the issue was a loser for them. Donald Trump can't lose here. This is what, again, if they did anything other than goof on the president's tweet, it brings attention to their productions of Clueless of Seattle that the president already has. They did not want attention to this. They wanted this to remain a local story. They did not want this to hit the national media. And the Democrats in Washington did not want this on the national media. They do not want the president talking about it. They do not want eyeballs on it. President Trump actually can't lose here. If Durkin or Inslee take action, as of this point, he can now say it's because he prompted them to do it. Remember what I told you about what happened in Minneapolis? My relative who lives there. The mayor and the governor did nothing until Trump tweeted about it and then sent in police and guard. And that relative now who was a Trumper, big Democrat, said he will crawl over broken glass to vote for Trump this time around because of it. The reality is, like I say, he can't lose. If they take action, he can say it's due to his prompting. But if they don't take action, every single day that the Mayor Durkin and Governor Inslee play the Clueless in Seattle card is a win for Trump and a loss for Democrats. And anytime he wants to, he doesn't even have to deal with it every day. Anytime things are going bad or that he wants to emphasize this, he can just tweet out, still waiting on Governor Inslee on the mayor. All he has to do is do that. And he can bring more attention to it. And if he does it in a week, it's a week and they're still holding this place. It's 2 weeks and it's still holding this place. He can emphasize this whenever he wants. And then when they act, it becomes, because Trump forced them to act, assuming that they bother to act. So he can emphasize any individual act of outrage by the people in this autonomous zone and any bit of cowardice or indecision by the governor. In fact, if I was President Trump, every time I talked about it, I'd use the hashtag Clueless in Seattle. That is what I would do. That would be the obvious thing to do. He can let this simmer for weeks. And while that's going on, he can, and I'll put real money. He already has talked to a general and said, I want you to start to make a plan on how to retake this area. Take a look at the area. Take a look at the layout. Tell me what you need, how to do this with the least possible damage, the least possible loss of life. Most effective way of doing this. And because the mayor and the governor are dithering, a general who's given this assignment is going to have weeks to plan out every single bit, decide exactly what resources he needs, how many men, how many trucks, where they need to be deployed, how they're going to do this. So every day they let this go on, the plan can develop. And the resources necessary can be moved into a place close enough that when Trump says okay, they can go in and strike when the iron is hot. Sort of like what happened in Fitchburg here. One of the big lies about what happened in Fitchburg is that it was such peaceful, it was so good. When in reality, there were troops nearby. There were 50 to 150 armed troops nearby. There were tons of police deployed, but out of sight of the protests. They were ready to pounce. They were ready to pounce. They just made it clear, we can pounce. Not going to right now, but we can at any time. Trump is going to have all the time in the world to plan this out and to let his people do this out. Now, again, there's no need to hurry. And the reason why I wouldn't hurry is that there is some small satisfaction to this. Remember, Washington is a deep blue state. Seattle is a deep blue city. Antifa has been there for years. And the governor and the mayor has had a chance to do something about it, and it chose not to. The people of Washington freely chose Governor Inslee. And the people of Seattle freely chose Mayor Durkin. And I suspect that Donald Trump is going to wait until all the plans are made. Everything is ready to move at a moment's notice. So when he decides that enough is enough and he moves in, he'll be able to strike quickly and decisively. And until then, with no more than an occasional tweet, he'll let the people of Washington State in general, and Seattle in particular, enjoy the production of Clueless in Seattle, getting as all voters get in a republic, the results of the government they deserve good and hard. Seattle chose this for themselves. And the production of Clueless in Seattle, which is going to go national, by the way, if the left perceives that this is going to work, there are going to be radical elements that are going to go national on this in other cities. And the Democrats are terrified of this, and they should be. Now, I want to reference a piece on Twitchy. Seattle Mayor Durkin tweets big tough thread claiming she's got this. But she trips over a police chief. And again, this is from Twitchy. It's clear that President Trump got under Mayor Durkin's skin when he pointed out she has completely lost control of her own city. We suppose she had to go full girl power and claim things are going exactly as she wants. So she doesn't look like the dumpster fire we all know she really is. But it's only making her look worse. We're not entirely sure why she thought this was smart. And here's her tweet. It's clear real Donald Trump doesn't understand what's happening in the 5 square blocks of our city. Carl Anderson and Capitol Hill for decades have been a place for free speech, community, and self-expression. Lawfully gathering and expressing First Amendment rights, demanding we do better as a society and provide true equity for communities of color is not terrorism, it's patriotism. The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, Chaz, is not lawless wasteland of anarchist insurrection. It is a peaceful expression of our community's collective grief and the desire to build a better world. This is the mayor now. Given his track record, it's not hard to believe that Trump is wrong again. The thousands of individuals who have been on Capitol Hill, I think you've seen what I've seen. The painting of Black Lives Matter along Pine Street, food trucks, spaghetti potlucks, teaching and magazines. Seattle is passionate. We demand justice, and I believe nothing will be at the forefront of true, meaningful change. Distract our city from the work that needs to be done. Notice she thinks she's one of them. She's not, and they know it. I remain committed to working with the community, including the organizers currently on Capitol Hill, to reimagine how we do things in the city and what investments in public health, safety, and economics and justice look like. And it goes on. She tweets and tweets and tweets. But the problem is that the police chief says that calls for help have more than tripled because of that free speech zone that she's talking about. And that we've already seen some of the things that are happening. And this is from Bearing Arms. Antifa goons have managed to take control of about 6 blocks of Seattle real estate. They declared it the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, as we wrote about yesterday. As part of the process, police pulled out of the area, leaving the police station in the neighborhoods to the anarchists. Of course, there's been all kinds of hilarious issues within CHAZ, such as the homeless they invited having stolen all their food and ate it, leaving nothing for the CHAZ denizens to eat. But without any cops, at least there's no police brutality, right? You'd think. You'd be wrong. Early today, somebody posted a clip to Reddit, which shows Simone and a group of people confronting a graffiti artist. Things escalate, and eventually the tagger is assaulted by someone in the group, and his phone taken away. The video is about an hour long, but here's a summary created by someone in the Reddit thread. Man was tagging over someone else's art. Raz and his group approach, separating him from the crowd, chasing him for 2 blocks. He begins to film him with his phone. They take it from him. He tries to get it back. They attack him, kicking him in the head and breaking his glasses. At one point, Raz threatens to shoot the man. Then they begin to gaslight him and that it was all his fault. Audio for the most at the end because women in Raz's crew filming puts the phone down while the stream continues. So in a couple of days, they already have a warlord. Simone claims that everything God discussed, and that's as good, discusses all as well. He even claims the tagger's father wants Simone to monitor him. God help the kid. What happened is predictable. When there's no government, all it takes is someone strong enough to step in and take control. That person often becomes something of a warlord like Raz Simone. Or Simone can claim it was all peaceful, but some of the highlights of the altercation includes phrases like, "We're the police of this community now. We got the point where we're addressing this physically was the best way to get our point across." In response to say the subject's glasses was broken during the assault, "Yeah, we should have broken your face. Don't make no threats. I'll blow your brains out." And again, this is all from the tape of this guy. Of course, the threat wasn't clear anywhere in the video. The transcriber believes it was in response to the tagger saying he wanted to leave within the next 15 minutes. Sorry, that's a threat, not a statement. However, what we're seeing here will continue within the CHAZ. In fact, it will get worse. You see, governments suck, but they exist because something will exist to govern within a group of people. And in fact, let's point out that John Adams said that public business has to be done by somebody. And if the wise and the honest do not do it, it will be done by some people who are not. And let's go further. Let me give you Ed Morrissey here. This is again from Hot Air. MAGA at the CHAZ. First, the walls go up, and then the forced deportations. This is from earlier today, 10:01 a.m., about 5 hours ago. Quote, has anybody noticed the curious connection between the radicals at the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone and Donald Trump's policies? After declaring the 6-block zone in Seattle separate from the U.S., the first thing they did was erect walls at the border to prevent illegal immigration in the enclave. Yesterday, as Tom Hall's Julia Rojas pointed out, the CHAZ mob went better. They began forced deportations. Now, I've got to tweet this out because I want to try and get a few more people listening to the podcast. So you're going to have to bear with me for about 20 seconds while I put the microphone down over here. I will try and speak loud while I'm doing this. I'm going over here. Now talking. Ed Morrissey's piece at Hot Air about MAGA and forced deportations in CHAZ, Seattle. Listen live here. And let's see if I have the right link still there. There we are. So let's tweet that out, and hopefully we'll get a few more people in the chat and so forth. Well, anyways, back to Ed Morrissey's piece. Apparently, they don't think much of birthright citizenship either. If we could just get them to embrace free market, these guys might go full MAGA at some point. Well, as you imagine, the language in the clip is not safe for work. And again, this is Julia Rojas, who's quoting, found the community garden that is being set in the park near the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Occupiers have set up tent in the park. Occupiers forced this guy who was live streaming inside the zone. The crowd was calling him a white supremacist, though the man was being pushed out, says he's simply anti-abortion advocate. The crowd answered, who don't matter? This motherfucker. Hey, shouldn't these progressives have offered him sanctuary while his application to dismiss deportation proceedings was still pending? Offer him a work permit? Celebrate his humanity in a bit? All tongue and cheekery inside, this is a scary reveal into what Chaz represents. It's not human rights. It's not true democracy. It's not really anything anarchy except for a means to an end. The end is a dictatorship based on violence. The left doesn't. One thing you got to remember about the left: they don't mind a dictatorship as long as they're the dictators. This is the left. That's what they are. That's what they've always been. The crime in this case: how long before the People's Tribunals stopped forming along with forced confessions of penance before the proletariat? This case was a combination of opposing abortion and using a cell phone to document the process of policing. Now, remember when everyone wanted police cameras? Well, apparently Chaz, the Seattle Autonomous Zone, doesn't want cameras on them to see what they're doing. And about the same time, and again, I'm jumping ahead in this piece, at about the same time Chaz started forced deportations, Mayor Jerry Duncan declared it nothing more than a tailgate party, contradicting Donald Trump's characterization. And they have to do this. The left is so invested, and this is what the main thing here. The left is so invested in this, they have to pretend that this is something it's not. When you can see the video, it's not as though the video and the audio aren't out there for people to see. Senator John Kennedy, a Republican of Louisiana, replied that Durkin needs to take her meds and wake up. It's not the most colorful response he had, and there's a video embedded there. Quote, I don't mean disrespect, but the mayor needs to take her meds. She cannot maintain order in Seattle without law enforcement officials. She just can't. Kennedy said earlier, stating he believes she wrongly withholding police to stop the demonstrators from maintaining control. We now see Chaz forcibly ejecting people from their homes and businesses, violations of civil rights of these Americans in America, no matter what Chaz says about autonomy. Where are Jenny Durkin and Jay Inslee in this crisis? When will the city of Seattle and the state of Washington act to protect the civil rights of Americans? Or will the federal government have to act instead? And I think they're going to, what they really want is Trump to go in there with troops. Because the one thing the Democrats, you have to remember, there's two factors being played here. Part of it is the electoral factor. The Democrats do not dare go in there because this is their muscle base. They can't win elections without these people. That's how thin they are. Now, they could probably win some elections in Washington, but they don't want an alien. To them, this would be like in the 50s or the 40s or the 30s if the Democrats were speaking out against the Klan in the South. They couldn't do it. This is the Democrats' Klan. This is their new muscle. They can't speak out against them for two reasons. First of all, to speak out against it angers Democrats nationwide. To speak out against it also illustrates that Trump was right, and it isn't a block party. But you got to remember something else that the mayor and the governor are figuring. Now, I'm a Sicilian, and I'm a Trump supporter, and I'm a conservative. And I'm presumed to have a gun, and I'm presumed to be willing to use it. Now, I have absolutely no intention of letting anybody know whether that presumption is true or false. But you can presume that about a lot of conservatives, that they're armed. And if someone's coming after them or their family, they'll let them move. You don't presume that about a lot of liberals. And I think that if they go after them, the first people they're going to go after isn't the National Guard. It isn't going to be the Army. They have guns and shoot back. It's going to be after these people, the mayor and the governor, these Democrats, the local counselors. They are afraid of personal retribution because these people have access to them. These people can walk up and pretend we want to discuss something and blow their brains out. They're physically intimidated. And now Governor Inslee, now remember how I gave you Governor Inslee's earlier tweets about the president? Here's Governor Inslee yesterday now. This is a challenging time. Many in our state are expressing heartfelt outrage at the very real injustices in our society. We have to work to do now in future to advance our gains. I spoke with Mayor Jenny and her team about the situation in Capitol Hill. Although unpermitted, we should remember we are still in a pandemic. The area is largely peaceful. Peaceful protests are fundamentally American. I will be hopeful that there's a peaceful resolution. However, an anti-NGO has the police chief saying, quote, Rapes, robberies, and all sorts of violent acts have been occurring in the area, and we're not able to get to them. That's the largely peaceful area that the governor is talking about. So what does the governor say in response to that? That's that tweet of the police chief saying that was at 12:03 today. The governor answered an hour and 20 minutes later. We will not allow threats of military violence against Washingtonians coming from the White House. The U.S. military serves to protect Americans, not the fragility of an insecure president. That is what they have to say. If they say anything else, if they do anything else, it illustrates that Trump is right. And Trump can, again, bring this up over and over again. And there's this incredible piece, again, this is from Twitchy. It's titled, CNN reporter telling Anderson Cooper how peaceful Chaz is being interrupted by an angry Chaz engine. Incredible segment. CNN and this is tweeted from Steve Krauser. Incredible CNN segment. Reporter says how peaceful it is in Chaz. One of the protests crashes the live shot and tries to organize the people to interrupt the report. Reporter then says no doubt some of these protesters are armed. So they're telling you that it's sort of like when that guy was saying these are peaceful protests while buildings are burning behind them. So you actually have armed guys. They're saying how peaceful it is while being intimidated by armed guys behind them. Of course they're saying that. There are armed guys behind them. They're scared. They're scared of these people. I mean, obviously they also want to help the Democrats because they think they need to do this, but they're scared. These guys know that the left, the first people up against the wall, will be their own leftists because they can get to them easier. Robespierre beheaded plenty of people in the revolution, and it's pretty bad. You have members of the city councilors saying, let them have it. And they're talking about plans to retake the district. This is again, Ed Morrissey. This one's just from an hour and a half ago. Seattle Mayor, PD Chief to Chaz. Let's make a deal. City Council member, let him have it. Update. Police Department planning to retake precinct with a question mark. A deal with whom exactly? Raz Simone, the alleged warlord of Seattle's Capitol Hill Anonymous Zone? People's Party politician Nikita Oliver? I'm not the leader, she told KOMO this morning, which leaves Seattle Mayor Durkin and the police chief Carmen Best with no one to discuss disbanding Chaz. And that's precisely what they want. Quote, city officials are trying to quarter a deal, but because there's no credentialed leadership among protesters, getting the voices at the table remains a challenge. Nikita Oliver is a community activist with a long history in Seattle. She showed up to the East Precinct Thursday to let her support to the protests. She has no idea when the marches will leave. I'm not the leader. I can't answer the question. I'm not making the decisions. David Lewis, who's led some of the earlier marches from Westlake Park, and the next move is unclear. Every single person here has its own mission. This does make it a wee bit difficult to negotiate, but it's a dodge to some extent too. Perhaps a too aggressive assertion of leadership would create a fracture and collapse within Chaz. But more importantly, if they deem themselves membership, the leaders, think about this. Ed doesn't say this. I'm saying this. If they deem themselves the leaders, then the government has someone to prosecute, because the federal government can prosecute all of these crimes. Everything that Chaz is doing right now can be prosecuted as a civil rights violation. Let me repeat that. Everything that Chaz is doing right now in Seattle could be prosecuted as a civil rights violation by the United States, not by local police, not by state police, but by the federal government. These are all federal offenses. That's why they're all saying, we're not the leader. We're not the leader. They're not stupid. They know this. They're not stupid enough. Back to Ed's piece. But at the very least, the people with credible threat of force are running the show. This includes armed activists as well as those with the ability to whip up mob actions, as seen as the Julia Rosas video of the forced ejection of a young man from Chaz yesterday. The lack of centralized leadership makes it difficult to get any coherent list of demands, too. They run from a list of 5 to 30 or more demands, each more outrageous than the last. According to the move, demands people of color who are still serving sentences for violent crimes must be given a retrial, and all prisoners must be given full and unrestricted right to vote. You know, they say they're not the United States. They shouldn't have any rights. Other free Capitol Hill demands include reforms to education and increase the focus on Black and Native American history, free college, reallocating funds from the Seattle Police Department to socialize health and medicine. I don't see I want the letter M stricken from the English language out of that list for those of you who remember Steve Martin. Along with major changes to the criminal justice system, the Free Capitol Hill movement listed demands costs for Seattle hospital and healthcare facilities to employ Black doctors and nurses to care for Black patients. And again, Med Morrissey now. So you say segregation. So these Democrat supporters are calling for segregation. They're George Wallace, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. George Wallace would be so proud, at least the 60s version of George Wallace would be so proud of this people. Strom Thurmond, the 56 version, would be so proud of these people. Another difficulty in negotiating with would-be leaders who don't mind ceding the 5 blocks to the city to anarchy. Seattle City Councilman Kashama Swabat, last seen pushing the city's abortive head tax on corporations, would prefer to see Durkin and the rest simply surrender to Chaz's mob as a victory for community control. To call this nonsense is hardly strong enough. Seattle in a 5-block area has been under, quote, community control for as long as democratically elected government has existed. Chavez sits on the very body that controls Seattle, including its policing, and has all the authority and jurisdiction needed to regulate it. Chaz isn't community control, it's mob rule. It's insane to conflate the two under any circumstances. But to have a city council member do so reflects the long-standing idiocy of people who elected Savin to that position. Because remember, for them to suggest otherwise is to take responsibility. Time is running out for retaking the precinct. KOMO reports today, as of today, as 9/11 calls response times are too long without the police precinct base. Not to mention the Trump timer. Now, I think Trump is, like I said, I think he's going to let this stew. I don't think he's going to move I think he's not going to move until there's a complete and utter plan to do it. I think he's going to let them stew as long as he can. He's going to string them out. And again, part of this is because this is what the people in Seattle voted for. These are the people that they put in charge. So they give the government they deserve. Now, it would have been nice if they deserved something better, but that's what they got. This is what they deserve. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. I mean, it's not hilarious to people living there. I feel bad for the residents and the businesses there. You guys voted for these people. You guys didn't stand up and stop them. When I was worried about, and this might seem disingenuous since I'm in a place that's safe, but 2 weeks ago, I didn't know if my house was safe. 2 weeks ago, I had arranged with the guy, the owner of the diner down the street, that if thugs were coming up from a particular direction, that I would be with him to try and stop them. We didn't know about the National Guard. We didn't know about what the police had planned. We didn't know that actually Governor Baker and the mayor had this and was ready and were more ready than they let anybody on. We were ready to fight. I'm not much of a fighter. Look at me. I'm an old fat guy. This is my house. This is my neighborhood. You don't give in. You can't, because once you give it over to the mob, they own it. But again, this is the public thing we're seeing from these guys. Want to know what they're actually doing? Go to the Daily Mail and listen to that conversation out of Chicago. And this is the thing, like Dave Chappelle put out a video today, and it was a very good video. It talked about different people who were killed by police, and about how police, when one of the guys was killing a bunch of police, how a bunch of police showed up. He said to them, this identified to them, and that's why Black people identify it. And that wasn't a good argument as far as it went. But the problem is that while the mayors and such are saying there's no violence, privately on the phone, they're over there. I haven't seen shit like this before. Rioters are fucking lawless, with panicked officials who described gang members walking around with AK-47s during the George Floyd unrest. And again, all of this is media made because they thought this. Remember, the only reason why this is going on, the only reason why we reached this point is because the media thought that the George Floyd death, if elevated from a local story about a bad cop to a national story, would help elect Democrats. That's the only reason for it. That is the only reason for it at all. And here's another from the president. This is from 5 hours ago. Seattle mayor says that about anarchists taking over the city. It's the summer of love. These liberal Democrats don't have a clue. The terrorists burn and plundle our cities, and they think it's just wonderful, even in death. Must end the Seattle takeover now. And of course, the governor's attacking the president for going after this. At some point, and this, I'm quoting this from, this is a piece from our pundit again. At some point, probably sooner or later, Biden and the National Democrat leadership are going to get inchy about Inslee and Durkheim allowing this to go on. They have a major electoral momentum at this moment. Now, again, I don't believe this part. Polls show Americans shifting to the left on matters of race and police reform. I don't believe so. The left is trying to start a fire to burn down everything by hyperventilating about defunding the police. But Biden and practically every other Democratic senator has worked to douse it again because they're trying to deny who they are. The last thing they need now, and this is funny because this was written after I wrote my post, is the spectacle of law and order breaking down in Seattle in front of news cameras, seemingly with the approval of local authorities, but not just local authorities, overwhelmingly Democrat local authorities, while Trump, at the moment that Trump is pivoting to law and order. This is big trouble for these guys. But it's going to be even bigger trouble if Clueless in Seattle, the production, decides to go on tour. Because once it goes on tour to other cities, it's going to be a problem for the left, bigger than it is now. And all I can say about it is you get, in the Republic, you get the government you deserve. And I'm sure that some people in Seattle thought they deserved better. Well, that's topic number one. Let's switch over to topic number two. Since we're talking about a world without police, and the folks in Seattle have been kind enough to demonstrate some of these things, I want to talk about one or two aspects of this that are getting no attention about this defund police. And that's about what it actually means. Now, if you are a grievance studies major, you think disbanding the police is a great idea. Maybe you've been watching Harley Quinn season 2 and you think, hey, that's for me. But part of this will be involved the return of riding shotgun. Now, everybody knows that riding shotgun means sitting in the front. But if you're of my age, I'm 57 years old. I had a birthday last month. Couldn't do anything about it, unfortunately, because of the lockdown shut. Well, riding shotgun used to be, if you watched old Westerns, you'd know this, a person on a stagecoach next to the driver actually carrying a shotgun. And his job was to ride shotgun to scare away potential thieves or attackers, because there was not a cell phone to call police. And most places did not have a police department. You might have one sheriff and a couple of deputies. That was the law. And they would deputize posses or people to help them because that's all they had. And if no one was willing to help, you were out of luck. Oh, and if you were a criminal and you were caught and they couldn't defend the jail, you were even more out of luck because you would end up lynched. And for those of you who don't understand it, lynching was not something restricted to people of color. Plenty of non-people of color were lynched, probably a lot more, because you were dealing with a lot more people. But I digress. Think about this. 150 years ago, riding shotgun meant this, that. You would, like I said, your job was to watch for armed attackers of any stripe. You're talking about an age where lawlessness was common. And the entire population was acquainted with death every day. It's not like the Kindergarten of Eden that people live in today, where they're safe from everything. The Civil War had just ended. If you talk about 1875, Civil War was 10 years ago. Most of the men served. Well, not most men, but there are millions of men served. So people were used to seeing literally hundreds of thousands of people dead every day. Didn't bother them. I mean, it bothered them, but this was no. If one guy ended up shot, that's no big deal. Remember what Sherman said? I've come to look upon the death of a few hundred men as a thing of little discourse, because he'd seen tens of thousands. Now, they had no problem. Because of that, they had no problem discharging a shotgun to kill a potential attacker. Well, now we have the automobile, we have quicker travel, we have quicker communications, and a regular police force. So now you don't need an armed truck except for the most valuable things like a currency truck. If you see a Brinks truck delivering currency, there'll be a guy in there armed because that's very valuable. But now a UPS truck, you don't need a got the police. Someone call the police. A food truck, someone call the police. But now, and again, as laws became stricter and the deaths less familiar, the risks of discharging a weapon in defense of a cargo increased. And the presence of police who could be called in case of trouble would make the risk of going after the lesser cargo worse than the reward. Now imagine this without the police. First of all, if you're a thief looking for a quick score, or an addict looking in need of money for a fix, suddenly the UPS truck making deliveries, or a tractor trailer heading for a store, or a mail truck delivering packages, or an Uber driver with a passenger become very inviting. Who cares if they take your picture? You probably have a mask on. The police aren't coming. They're either been abolished or defunded. Suddenly, the absence of that police, either due to the force being abolished or limited resources, mean that nobody responds to those calls. So that means suddenly the UPS truck is in danger. Suddenly the Uber driver is in danger. Suddenly the tractor trailer truck is in danger. Bad news for the delivery driver who's taking his life into his hands in such a city. And remember, while an individual package might not be worth a lot, a UPS truck with anything with a full load be worth a lot to hit and loot. And what isn't kept for oneself turns up at the local area flea market or pawn shop or gets sold on eBay. So that means you need a second person in the truck. But if there are no police or to call or prospective police, then that second person basically watches them empty the truck or gets forced to help them empty it. So you need an armed guard. And if you're talking a tractor trailer making regular deliveries, and a tractor trailer that could have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of items in tow, suddenly the need of an armed guard exists every single day. So on the bright side, this is going to mean a lot of job opportunities for people willing to shoot. Suddenly, it's like buggy whips. Nobody wants buggy whips anymore. Nobody needed shotgun drivers. Now they're going to need shotgun drivers. And of course, those jobs are not going to go to people on the left who are burdened with student loans who are triggered by a speaker who disagrees with them, because they won't have the nerve to make a decision. Probably go to a MAGA man familiar with a gun, knows how to and when to use it or not. He'll get that job. But it gets even better. Think about insurance, for example. If there's no police, then suddenly the price to insure that UPS truck has gone up. The price to ensure that delivery goes up. And because, of course, now if they're not going after anything too nonviolent, if you're thinking, well, I don't have to worry, I can just get everything from Amazon. Your Amazon package isn't going to be at your stoop. Someone's going to take it and sell it. Now, you might call Amazon and say, hey, this is not there. Well, hey, they call up, we delivered it. Here's the record. Now, maybe Amazon will decide that they have to do something about this. Now, and you got to remember something about insurance. Insurance is a lot like a casino. Insurance is basically all about risk. You know, like when I was younger, you didn't see all these ads with Alex Trebek selling life insurance for people 50 to 80, no prior medical thing, because the life expectancy wasn't that high. My dad died at 66. But now that the life expectancy is up, suddenly you can insure people 50 to 80 and still make money. Now, what happens if you're Minneapolis and you don't have a police department? How much is the price going to be to insure a business? How much is the price going to be to insure a car? How much is it going to be to insure an apartment? Maybe that price will be prohibitive. Maybe it won't be. But let's even think about the Amazon deliveries. Now, again, if they're not going to respond to a truck or a UPS truck getting nailed, they're not going to respond to porch pirates. Now, what I think is going to happen from this is you're going to see an Amazon charge. you're going to see a bonus charge for deliveries to a certain area. But if they say, well, you can't do that, that's racist, then I suspect what you're going to see is an insurance waiver. Amazon, in their small print, will probably have something saying, we take no responsibility for package once it's delivered, unless you pay this extra bit of insurance, then we'll guarantee to. That's what I see coming. Amazon saying, we'll only replace the package if you pay this insurance price. Because they're afraid of being called racist if they say, we're not delivering to you, we're not delivering to you. Or we're going to charge you a surcharge because there's no police in your area. Suddenly it becomes the responsibility of the person to pay. Do you want to take the risk of getting your package? Or do you not? Pay this little extra and we'll guarantee the package. Amazon will make out. Now, they might not be pleased about a surcharge like that, but if you think they're not pleased about that, wait until they see the price, if they live inside an area without police or with defunded police. Wait till they see the price on their car insurance or their renter's insurance or their homeowner's insurance and the higher rates on loans because it's such a bad risk. All of these things are coming, and any economics major could have told you they were coming. But it gets better. And this is the thing that should really scare them that I haven't posted on yet. You see, there is an image of the right and people like me on the right that, I mean, we get taunted a lot, and the police get taunted a lot because they figure no one's going to hit back. And for the most part, that's true. People like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, they just took it. Other people, they just take it when these people say these things or do these things because it ain't worth the trouble for a lot of them. They don't want to bother. They don't want to deal with it. But there's also some people who take it because they know that if they punch this guy in the mouth or break this guy's jaw or dump him in a wastebasket or shoot him in the ass, the cops are going to come. Well, what do you think is going to happen once the people who restrain themselves, not because of Christian ideals, but because they don't want to deal with the retaliation from the police, decide, there's very little risk if I take this guy and punch him out? What's going to happen to that leftist in the bar who starts harassing people? He's going to get punched out. He's going to get beaten bad. What's going to happen to the abortion clinics and the abortion clinic workers? Now, one of the things about Christianity is, when you say all lives matter, as I would insist, a guy like George Tiller, his life mattered. He was an abortionist. He did late-term abortionists. He was a disgusting man. He was eventually murdered, by the way, in his own church. I think that was disgusting too, because it's still murder. Tiller was a disgusting man, but he didn't deserve to be murdered. Most people who are proper Christians think like that, but at least one person didn't, because that person went and murdered him. What's going to happen when those people decide that there's no police to stop them? What's going to happen to abortion clinics, for example, in Minneapolis if there's no police? What's going to happen to them in Seattle? What's going to happen to them in other places? Now, I'm delighted at the prospect of abortion clinics closing down, but I'm not delighted at the prospect of some crazy deciding to murder people or bomb people. You don't have police. There are going to be people who are beyond the line, same people that we would condemn and turn in if we thought they were doing something, who are going to think it's open season. And not just on that, on other things of the left. Because the police have two functions. The first function of the police, although theoretically by law this is not a function of them, the first function of the police is to protect the citizenry. But the second fundamental function of the police is to protect the accused. Because if the citizens are angry, the accused ends up beaten or killed. The police ensure a fair trial for the accused. Now, if they go over the line, This is, I say again, my solution has always been very simple: enforce the law. If a looter goes over the line, you enforce the law. If a policeman goes over the line, you enforce the law. It's a very simple thing. And like most simple things, it's difficult. But once radicals decide that they're not going to enforce the law, that the law is not going to be enforced, it's not going to be only the leftist radicals who are enabled. It'll be the ones on the right. And despite what people think on the left, though they're not very common, the ones on the right don't walk in the normal circles. The difference between the leftist radicals and the rightist radicals is you will find leftist radicals working on campaigns. You'll find rightist radicals shunned. But they don't seem to get that. This is a danger, and Ben Franklin put it very, very well when he said, experience keeps a dear classroom, but some will appear in no other. Right now in Seattle, I bet you there are a lot of families in that Seattle autonomous zone who voted for leftists, who hate Trump. And they're getting a first-hand experience of what life is without police. Experience is a dear teacher, but some will learn and know others. Now, if you're grievance studies majors, you've probably never considered those things that I've already talked about. And there's a lot more, and I'll be writing about a lot more, because organized crime is going to love it. But you better start thinking about it. You better start thinking about it fast, because it's going to burn you. Now, the final topic. Now, I mentioned in my tweets a guy called Paulo, and if you go to the website, you'll see the video of Paulo. Now, Paulo's not a political guy, and I didn't interview him on politics. He has nothing to do with politics. He's a guy who came here from Brazil in 2004. He's worked like a dog, didn't know the language, didn't know the culture. And what he does, he's learned carpentry and so forth. He buys foreclosed houses, fixes them up, spends months doing it, and then rents them out. And if you're watching this on my website, you can see the video of what Paulo did to the house next door. You'll see the first video I shot, and he was there 6 or 7 days a week, holidays, didn't matter. He was there fixing, working like a dog. He rented out the house. It's now empty. He was cleaning it today and was renting it again. And I said, I didn't get a chance to see the house inside after he fixed it. So he gave me a tour, and that video was there. And I asked Paulo at the end of the video, because again, there were worries about riots and stuff around here, but what he thought about, what would happen to his investments if that happened. He said, well, it'd be tough, but what can you do? But I also asked him about because he's from Brazil. If a person's coming from Brazil and thinking to come to America, what advice would you give him? And he said, it's a very different culture. He said, in Brazil, it's a family culture. You always have the family to come back on. But America, you're on your own. Now, and he said, you can do well for yourself, even just picking up trash. But you got to work hard, and you got to count on yourself. You got to do it on your own. And I think that really illustrates the genius of America, that a guy could come here at age 16 from a country, not speak the language, not know the culture. Now he buys houses. Now he owns several houses and is renting a bunch because he worked like a dog, and he didn't make excuses for times he failed. Now, I failed several times. The fact that I am talking to you via a live stream podcast, no frills from my couch, illustrates that I failed. I had a syndicated show. I had a show on a 50,000 watt station, and I was going out trying to get my own advertising. Couldn't swing it. So I'm here. That's on me. Maybe I wasn't as appealing a show. Maybe I charged too much. Maybe I didn't. There's a million things I probably did wrong, which is why I work in a warehouse now and do this once a week, plus the writing. I make a little bit off the writing, but I couldn't support myself solely on it. That's my failure. I regret that I failed. I'm not embarrassed that I've tried, but sometimes I think about it and then I kick myself of the things I could have done different. And I'm 57. I'm not going to. I don't have the wherewithal to try and do. I'll never be. I've had one column in the New York Post. I've been on Fox once. I've questioned Donald Trump twice in press conferences, but I'm probably never going to be bigger than I am now, and that's on me. Maybe there's something I could have done better. Maybe there isn't. But I'm never going to get paid by any big company to do this stuff. And I understand that. But if you're a Black American, whether you fail at the school level, whether you fail at any level, you're being told it's not your fault. It's racism's fault. And the problem is when you fail, you have a choice between getting up and going again or deciding the price is too high. At my age, the price is too high to try beyond what I'm doing now. But if you tell someone it's racism's fault, then it's nothing you did. And that means you don't correct your own mistakes. That, more than anything else, in my opinion, is what's holding back the Black American community. Now, this hasn't applied to Blacks who have come from Africa. I've seen them advance because they don't take that excuse because it's a different culture. Now, granted, the people who were descended from slaves, their original culture was ripped apart, and this quote-unquote slavery culture has become their culture that they can look back on. And that's not a great thing. But once you decide everything, every one of your failures is due to racism, you got problems. And what's really funny is to see guys like Chappelle and guys like Donald, people who are at the top of their professions, who have succeeded despite this, go back to that. And this, in my opinion, is too many people who make their living off of this. The Black community has been playing Charlie Brown to the left's football, Lucy, for decades. The people of the 50s who suffered actual racism, let me give you a clue. If you are going to a college that costs $40,000, you ain't oppressed. You're part of the 1%. And not only the part of the 1% in the United States, but 1% in the world and the 1% of all time. You ain't oppressed. You may think you're oppressed because you've been told it, but you ain't. Ask someone who actually grew up in Jim Crow how oppressed you are, who actually had to worry about their lives every day like that. Think about that. Until the Black community learns that lesson and lets itself learn, and sometimes an excuse can be very comforting, but an excuse is the most dangerous thing in the world. It's an addiction. And that's the addiction that's actually dangerous to America in general and to the Black community in particular. And until that danger is acknowledged, the problem's not going to be solved. Well, that's all the time we have today. I want to thank you for joining us. A couple of reminders. The pieces I referenced are all in chat. Feel free to grab them there. If you liked this podcast, please consider sending it out to others. If you didn't do the live stream, the podcast will be there. If you really liked it and you haven't already, please subscribe on YouTube. I'm still 226 subscribers shy, trying to monetize the channel, which is probably why I don't get censored for some of the things I say. If you really like it, consider hitting the tip jar at DaTechguy.com. That's DaTechguy blog.com, because I'm out to get an extra $180 a month. Or consider buying my current book, Hail Mary, the Perfect Protestant and Catholic Prayer, available at Amazon and at my website. But feel free to do something to help keep it going. And I will spend, and if you do that, I will keep spending an hour or two on my day off talking to you about the issues of the week. Because again, my goal is to increase people and to get $180 a month more. Well, again, thank you for your time. I will see you next week. This is Pete the Tech Guy, and this edition of the Tech Guys Off the Radio is closed.